All right, recording is starting. Oh, by the way, just FYI, especially when we get to reading out loud, and feel free to say no if you're worried about it, but if people are cool with it, I'd love to take a snippet of the recording when we are reading out loud and be able to use that as sort of a, hey, here's how online learning works video. Is there anybody that's uncomfortable with that? If you are, let me know, and you can just turn off your video at that point. But I thought it would be cool to show that we're not giving up on the idea that we're going to read this text together and still have some fun with it.
Okay.
And would be kind of a cool way to show people how we do this. So yeah, that's a good question though, Zara. I mean, why just screw with this guy?
Yeah.
Because they're done hunting for the day, you know? It's like, what else are you going to do?
Why not?
And
they're
that
really
makes
investing a lot in
they really are. They put a
They
whole
really
lot into
are.
this.
They are. It's like a whole production. It's like a whole production.
It really is. And what's kind of interesting.
Wait.
Yeah.
Was a guy dressing up as the wife?
Yes.
Was it a guy who was dressing up as the lady? Okay.
Yep.
Was that the Lord or an actor?
So the Lord is
servants.
being his servant, but he's having his page play the guy's wife.
Oh, okay. That makes sense now. Okay.
And yeah, so the irony, of course, is that all of these actors, if you're not aware, are being played by men. Right.
Like most Shakespeare productions.
Right, because at this point in time, women were not allowed to be actors.
Mm-hmm.
So all of the actors are men. The females are actually played by younger, like boys, probably 16 to 18 or a young-looking 20. So that they looked a little more feminine. They didn't have beards and stuff yet, so it wasn't like comedic. And while they didn't play it for laughs, Shakespeare will sometimes write in jokes, like somebody will be, when a female is disguising herself as a male, she might actually make a joke about, oh, I think I can make a pretty convincing-looking female. Or like when they're disguising as a female, like in Merchant of Venice. Of course she's going to make a convincing-looking female. She's or a male. Mm-hmm. It's a male playing the role. So like when Portia dresses as a man, she makes a very convincing man because she's just a dude playing the role. So yes, they are just going to mess with Christopher Sly here, and they're going to make him think he's Lord. Now here's the weird part. This does not come back again. The only time you're going to see a bit of Christopher Sly is at the very end of the first scene of the play, right? The very last lines of, let's see, Act 1, Scene 1, I believe. Yes. At the very last lines of Act 1, Scene 1, you'll get 2 or 3 lines with Christopher Sly, and then we will never hear from him again in the rest of the play. They don't show up at the end and wrap him up. So that you can see why most people cut it from the play. Plus, then you have to hire an actor to be Christopher Sly who can't be in the play for a while, so he can't be another major character. All these people, you'd have to figure out what to do with, and that'd be extra salaries unless they doubled later. Somebody plays somebody who shows up only in like Act 4 and 5, so they could double. But so the experts honestly don't know the answer to this in terms of why Shakespeare didn't finish it. There's a couple of things that are speculation. One is that we just don't have surviving versions of the play that have those scenes where we come back to him. So that maybe he did. 2, he stole the plot device of having this happen from somewhere else. So it may have been that his play was done and he just decided to steal this and add it afterwards. 3, he may have started this way and just kind of got bored with the device and forgot about it and didn't go back to it. But because he wasn't really writing in a way that, he wasn't going to have a mass audience critique his work. He wasn't going to get raked over the coals on Twitter because he, had an ending that, like, hey, he didn't go back to his framing device. He would probably got into the play and was like, you know what? The Taming of the Shrew story is better. I'm just going to stick with that. That could have happened. So the honest answer is nobody knows. Anybody see Disney's Aladdin?
Yes.
The new one or the?
Oh yeah.
Either one, but the musical.
Oh.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Either one.
Yeah.
So in Aladdin, but especially the cartoon, I haven't seen the live action one, but in the cartoon, the genie in the beginning, right? You know the song Robin Williams sings in the beginning, Arabian Nights?
Hmm.
You know, when he's talking to the camera and he's, giving the whole story about the genie, closer, closer, come closer, too close, that whole thing.
Yeah.
And then he sings Arabian Nights, and it's clearly Robin Williams playing that street vendor. And so you're like, well, then obviously the end of the story should be we see that guy again and it's the genie, right? Did you ever realize that we never come back to that?
It
Mhm.
took me a couple years because when I first watched it, I had no idea that they were the same person.
Yeah, that's bugged me since day one of seeing that movie.
Yeah.
They just forget their own framing device. They're like, In the original draft, there was a whole reason for it, and they actually did it. But in the end, they were like, well, we've already recorded Robin Williams singing this, so let's just keep it. So it just goes to show you that, look, 400 years later, people still create stuff and they forget about their own framing devices. So the bigger question becomes, why is this induction here? Why have this bit with all of these characters that are not part of the play?
Is that
Oh,
rhetorical?
is that a question?
That's an actual question, yes. What do you
Okay.
think?
Oh, okay.
It's a tricky question because I don't know if you know enough to know the answer yet, but I welcome you to try to figure it out.
Okay, so my answer might not be the best answer, but
Give it a shot.
my first thought was, he spent so much time actually trying to write out these jokes. Why wouldn't he want to include it at that point? Because it's like, if you write like a 10-page paper and you write like a really good first half of it, but then you realize that it doesn't match up with your thesis, but you're so lazy that you keep it in anyways. Like that's how I feel about this.
Have you ever heard the expression "kill your darlings"?
No.
Mm-mm.
No. Okay. So this is an expression in writing, and the idea is the thing that you're most in love with in your script is probably out of whack with the rest of the script. So really what you need to do is kill the thing that you're most in love with to even everything out.
Oh no.
It's hard to do that, but I get what you mean.
So I saw a play in college called The King's Stag, and it was all about these animals in the forest. And so some of the animals were like a bird, and the bird was like all covered in feathers with a big goofy head. There was an alligator that was like a foam suit or crocodile with a guy crawling on the ground. And then the stag was this gorgeously done puppet with like 6 or 8 people working the head and the legs, and they were all dressed in black. So all you saw was the frame of the stag. And when the lights were right, it looked like it was moving alive on stage, except all of the other animals looked more like they were on Sesame Street. And it was such a beautiful effect. And so I brought this up in our design class when we were talking about it. And I actually thought it was so beautiful that it knocked the rest of the play out of whack.
Yeah.
And
I get that.
we had a guest designer talking. He actually agreed with me. But then in the end, he goes, but it was so beautiful that I wouldn't have wanted them to cut it. So I think they made the right choice. And I kind of went, all right, I guess that's the bottom line. Sometimes something is so good, you have to leave it in.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a good lesson for you when sometimes you're writing something and you spend so much time trying to bring 75% of it up to the level of that 25 that's really, really good. And maybe you'd end up with a more consistent story if instead you tamped down the 25%.
Mm-hmm. It's like that with like graphic design. I definitely get that. It's like I once had to do like a poster for like picking up litter, like Miss Ayers had that, and I made mine so like color coordinating, and it made the trash look really pretty that I literally looked at her. I was like, this doesn't look good, and it looks really good, but I don't think it looks good for this. So we fixed it, and it was better then.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that probably really ties into the art world.
Oh yeah.
So okay. But let's go with the assumption, regardless of whether or not, what Leanna's saying is right, that he wrote it and then did it. What made him want to write it in the first place? So let's back up to that question. Like, why would he have explored? He knows he's writing a play called Taming of the Shrew. I don't think, unless his original intent was a play called, The Weird Misadventures of Christopher Sly, and then when he had the play within the play happen, he was just like, oh, this is cool, I'm going to keep writing this. So If his intention was to sit down and write a play called Taming of the Shrew, why would he start with this induction?
Well, you mentioned before that this kind of can be like, I don't know how to describe it. Like this idea or whatever you see in here is kind of like a smaller example of the whole play.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's like just seeing something little before it helps you connect dots later in like the bigger picture. So maybe something like that, kind of prime everybody for the real thing.
When you're writing your essay, what do we have you put at the end of an introduction?
Thesis.
Oh, the main plot point.
Your thesis, but then what else?
Forecast.
The forecast.
Forecast.
A forecast.
What is your forecast doing?
Predicting how
describing
the
what's
entire story is going to
going
go.
It's telling you what's coming up. So maybe the induction is in a way the forecast for Taming of the Shrew.
But it doesn't have the same characters.
No, it doesn't. So maybe it's a forecast not for the plot, but for the themes.
So it's more allegory than direct translation.
Yes. So for example,
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
for example, what is the first image we see when the Lord comes in? We started reading this yesterday. What's happening in that scene? Do you remember?
They were laughing about like their dogs, right?
They're talking about their dogs, hunting and sport, right?
Mhm.
So that's where they start out with the idea of hunting and sport. And as we do a play that's going to be largely about people trying to get a wife, look at the comparison. Hunting and sport set up from the beginning. And in fact, you'll see a scene, wait for it when you see it and see if you remember this when we hit it. Eventually, and it's going to be a while from now, there's going to be a scene where this comes right into play. And if you catch it, you'll go, oh, it's just like that scene with the dogs. So yes, they're setting up the idea of hunting and sport. So are people really interested in a wife because they're in love, or is this partly the thrill of the chase?
Merchant of Venice vibes.
Exactly. And what happened to Merchant of Venice? The guy gets married and 2 seconds later is like, oh, gotta go help my friend. See ya. Thanks for the money, honey.
Yeah, that's nice.
So maybe that's part of it. But then another thing that happens, let's go back to Christopher Sly as a character. So the gist of the subplot with Christopher Sly is he's kind of a lowlife, right? He's drunk. He's so drunk that he falls back asleep while he's in the middle of a fight with the hostess. These guys come in, and what do they tell him?
We'll tell him directly.
Yeah, what do
they
they
were discussing before?
Right, what do they tell him though when they wake him up? What do they tell him?
They tell him he was in a coma. Something.
Okay, and who is he? Did they tell him?
He's
What was that?
Lord.
They tell him he's a lord, right? And then what happens? Watch this. You want to see something cool? Okay. I want to backtrack a little bit to talk about language, because this is an example of, you know, all those times you're doing Shakespeare and they talk about verse and prose and you have no idea what that means, or you're like, well, does it really matter? So take a look.
Mm-hmm.
If you look in the text at the induction first scene that we read yesterday, Sly and the hostess. Sly and the hostess are speaking in prose. And prose you can always recognize because it doesn't have the first letter capitalized and it's not in a particular format. So everybody see like Sly's line at line 5, you're a baggage.
Mm.
See how that line is written out like a normal paragraph? Yeah, it's got the spacing of a paragraph, but it's not anything unusual about it. You can also tell that Sly and then the word your is on the same line.
Yeah.
Look down at the Lord's first line. Do you see how on the Lord's line, the word huntsman comes underneath Lord?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's a visual cue to tell you that you're in verse instead of prose. So verse has meter. Once we have verse, it's structured. And you all probably know Shakespeare's meter is called?
Iambic pentameter.
Iambic pentameter.
Who knows what that means?
It's the amount of beats that are in it, right?
There's like 10 syllables broken up into like 5 2-syllable groups or something like that.
Yep, you've all got it. If you're music people, this is kind of easy to understand. Imagine, if you're a music person, that it's sort of like 8th note, quarter note.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that it goes da-da, right? Quarter note would go da, da, and every note would be the same length, right? Da, 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 da. Well, what an iamb is, I-A-M-B, is it's a little unit of measurement that says you have an unstressed syllable and a stressed one. So it's like da-da. So the second one's a little longer. And if you follow the rhythm, that's how it works. Huntsmen, I charge thee tender well my hounds. Breathe merriment, the porker is embossed. And we get that rhythmic, sing-songy kind of way that people will read it sometimes, which is not how you should deliver it. But as we're in verse, it's really easy to tell visually because we can see that on the left column, everything's capitalized, whether it should be or not. So, okay. So verse is an indication of a few things, right? One thing it's an indication of is heightened language. Anything important should be said in verse for the most part. People, Romeo and Juliet, but soft what light through yonder window breaks, that's all in verse. Lovers are going to speak in verse. It's important heightened language. Sometimes it's an indication of class, right? And important people, monarchy, royalty, rich people will speak in verse. Sometimes it's an indication of class, like here, Sly and the hostess speak in prose. So that tells us that they're not high class. Watch this. Turn to page, turn to the beginning of scene 2, induction scene 2. All right, see Sly talking to his serving men. Which one are we in, verse or prose?
Prose.
We're in prose, right? And you could tell the first serving man, however, and the second serving man are speaking to him in verse. Will please your lord to drink a cup of sack. Will please your honor taste of these conserves. Do you see how, first of all, the line is underneath so you can tell they're in verse, even though it's only one line? Sly, though, responds to them in prose. He's basically like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm Christopher Sly. Don't call me your honor, right? I don't drink sack. I drink beer. And he goes on about his clothing. But watch this. They tell him about it. He's like, what are you talking? Are you going to make me crazy? Now, turn to, I'm hoping the line numbers match up. Line 70. If you're looking at a digital text. Does everybody see that? Who's on the digital version? Anybody? So on the digital version, is Sly's line, I am a lord, like around line 68? Okay, so good. That matches up. Look at what happens. He responds in verse. Am I a lord and have I such a lady, or do I dream? Isn't that weird?
I did not notice that.
No, it's a neat little trick.
That's so interesting.
I know,
when
right?
I was reading through this, I marked it. I marked this passage like starting at line 68. I was like, this is where he starts to believe it.
Yes.
Like that's where the change is.
So
that's so cool.
Shakespeare shows you through the language that he actually starts to believe it on a deep level. He starts to actually speak in verse like an upper class character. Isn't that wild?
That's wild.
You know when people are like, oh, come on, Shakespeare, is he really so brilliant? Yes, he damn well is. That's amazing. That's like Inception level stuff right there.
Big brain.
Okay. So now watch this though. Here's what's even cooler. So that's a little technical thing that's kind of fun, right? Except, do you remember what I told you one of Shakespeare's biggest themes always is?
Natural order?
That's a big
things
concept.
aren't what they seem.
Things are not always what they seem.
Yeah.
So sometimes what makes things what they seem, or how do things become different? Well, here's an idea. So what makes you a lord? Birth or belief?
Is that like the theme?
Well,
it wouldn't be a theme. It would be a...
We could find a theme out of it, though, if we worked out what it means, right? Like the sentence. Yeah. So theme as a complete sentence, as we said. But yes. So this idea of maybe one of the things that defines who you are is what other people make you believe you are.
Whoa.
I know we haven't even
This
really
is
started
deep
the
for
play.
a second class. This is deep for a second class.
That's right. Dang it. That's right. Second class. We're online in the middle of the greatest natural catastrophe since 1918, and we've already learned something.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, what did we learn? Sorry, I got disconnected.
Good thing.
Oh dear.
we learned that in the induction setting up theme of the play, that this idea of perhaps one of the things that defines who we are is people telling us.
Okay.
So more than just, okay, I'm born to this. I am who I am because that's what I am, and that's how I was born. But maybe one of the things that makes me who I am is what I believe or what other people tell me so that I believe it.
Okay.
So for example, if people your whole life have told you you're a bad student, you're a bad math student, what are your chances of being a good math student?
Very low.
You're going to believe that, right? Other than that percentage of us that will then be, you know, the kind of people that will take it to heart and become a good math student just to spite them.
I mean, there was a study on that. There's like there's an experiment where you put like 2 bowls of rice like in your fridge, and to one you speak like badly and the other one like nicely. You know, it's like a thing I've seen like so many times. And then the one you speak nicely, it's kind of like remains like white and everything, and then the other one will like put your fire or something.
Wow.
And
I've actually seen that too.
yeah,
So
it's
be
supposed to-
kind to your food. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's like
Yeah.
yeah, but the way you
It's
talk
like-
to yourself, and there's also like studies with plants.
Plants. Oh, let me tell you, I wrote a paper once on plant ESP. So I'll tell you.
Yeah, so it's
Because I had to write a paper for I think it was a botany class at SEM, actually, a botany class, and so I wanted to find
Wait,
just
what is
something
ESP?
ridiculous, like that they can read minds, that plants can sense your thoughts and read your minds.
Oh, that's cool.
My cats can.
So somebody did studies about like putting lie detectors on these plants so they could sense like when they had feelings, and like having their owners think about burning them from thousands of miles away and seeing if they react to it and stuff.
that's actually so. Yeah.
Whoa.
There's also like some where you like speak like nicely to cactuses and tell them how they're protected, and then there you would take like
Oh.
they would like grow out their spines, like take them away because they know they're in like safe space because people told them to.
See?
Little things like that are so pure.
Well,
Yeah.
I think they're weird. I don't like the plants listening to me. I don't like that.
it's also
I'm
like
sorry.
dogs.
Are you mean
Well-
to your plants?
No, I don't
Yeah, you
have
better.
any.
Yeah, Leanna's like, oh crap! I've been pulling leaves off them for years. They all know about you, Leanna. They've been talking about it.
No. They're gonna plant an uprising.
That's right. They're right now. The plants are watching. Believe me.
God.
I wrote a haiku yesterday about the birds because when I walk outside, the birds are so noisy right now. I was like, they
I love
know
it.
they know we're weak right now. They're watching. Mark my words. Within 6
I thought
months,
you were
when
going
people
in a
start getting
totally
attacked by
different
birds,
direction.
you watch.
Oh my God.
You're gonna read a story about like this town that was attacked by birds.
A bit
Isn't
like
that like
Hitchcock.
Alfred Hitchcock? Yeah.
Yeah. There's a movie called The Birds. Okay. So here's what I want to do. I just wanted to give you a little idea about how the induction might play out and how we should at least just keep it in the back of our minds. But I really want to get into, and I managed to, let's see, I should stop recording so I don't have a record of this, right? I don't care. I actually managed to upload the video that I told you about. I managed to rip it so I could upload it privately. So fair use. I'm claiming fair use because normally I would just show you in class. But it's going to be a private upload link for us that I uploaded the entirety of that version of the play. And it may just be fun to catch up. And if you're having trouble understanding, it's so clear. It plays like a soap opera. I think I might have even posted it on the classroom page already.
I think it did.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're just looking to, if you're having trouble understanding it, or if you're the kind of person even who likes to hear it out loud while you're following the text, It's fairly faithful. You'll find it pretty useful. But here's what I want to do. I want to read a little bit, and I will be, again, the end notes person, so I'll pause and jump in with some notes. If anybody has a question, if there's something you don't understand or something you want to comment on, just raise your hand and I'll pause us. But let's cast us for right now. So I need a Lucentio.
Great volunteer.
That's close to my
Yeah,
name.
take volunteers. I need a Lucentio.
You're just using.
What's that?
I can do it.
Leanna, you want to be Lucentio? You got it.
Yeah.
I need a
Starts with an
Tranio. Lucentio servant.
Haha.
I'll do it.
All right, Zara.
I was about to
Tranio.
vote for you, Philip.
What?
I was like, Philip should do it.
I need.
Phil, do you want to do it?
Sure. Yeah. I'll take.
All right, Philip is doing it.
All right, you're trying to. All right, I need Baptista. The father.
I can do that one.
You got Baptista. All right, you take
I can do that
Baptista.
Yeah.
If somebody wants somebody with a fewer lines, I've got two characters, Gremio and Hortensio.
I'll do Gremio.
You got Gremio, okay?
I can do.
Hortensio.
Yeah, I can do. Yeah.
Okay. And the only other, so we're gonna run out of actors, but we're gonna ultimately need a Katerina and a Bianca. So let's see. Thomas, can you hear us all right? Maybe we don't have him there. Let's see. Philip, are you able to hear us okay?
Yes.
Can I get you to play Bianca?
Yeah, sure. I will try my best.
Okay. Yeah, as long as you leave your audio on, I think it'll work. But if you cut out, that's fine too. Let's see. Does anybody not have a role yet? Leanna,
I do, but it looks like mine is like. Oh, sorry. I was just saying it looks like the one that I'm doing is kind of only in the beginning. So if you need something towards the end, I can probably do it.
Okay. Let me do this. Your connection's a little in and out. Everybody's hearing me okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'll take Katerina because she's gonna have some coming up. So let's stick with this for now and see how it goes.
We have a message from Thomas here.
Yeah, I see that. Okay. So let's give it a shot.
Tranio, since for the great desire I had to see fair
Padua.
Padua, nursery of arts, I am arrived for fruitful Lombardy, the pleasant garden of great Italy, and by my father's love and leave am armed with his goodwill in thy good company, my trusty servant well approved in all. Here let us breed and happily institute a course of learning and ingenious studies. Pisa, renowned for grave citizens, gave me my being, and my father first, a merchant of great traffic through the world. Vincencio, come of the Bentivogli. Bentivogli. Vincenzio's son, brought up in Florence, it shall become to serve all hopes conceived, to deck his fortune with his virtuous deeds, and therefore.
Okay. So let me give you a couple of things here. So it sets up Lucentio. He's basically just wrapped up school, and he's showing up in town. And he gives us a little hint here. When he says he's Vincenzio's son, so we know his father, brought up in Florence. Florence is like a code word, but you don't know this. It would be like if I told you somebody was a New Yorker, right? If I said, oh, okay, enter Jim. He's a New Yorker. Would you make assumptions about that character?
Yes.
What would your assumptions be?
Probably loudmouth, likes pizza, very
Right.
boisterous.
Okay. And if I said, okay, this is Janine. She's a yoga instructor. Would you make assumptions about Janine?
Mm.
You'd probably, you'd be surprised if Janine was like a gruff Republican, right? You would assume she is like hippie PC granola, right? You expect that.
Vegan.
Mm-hmm.
So when they say somebody is from Florence, and I've heard them say Florentine or sometimes even Florentine, that's like code. Those are like young pretty boys. So, and what I mean by that is they're rich, they're good looking, well-spoken gentlemen, right?
I mean, like Florence itself, the city,
Yeah.
at the time, it was known like that's the dialect from Florence is the one that was adapted to the Italian language. So it was like the proper way to speak and everything.
Yes. So it was really like, I'm trying to think of like an American equivalent of what Florence would be like. You know what I mean? But
Like Upper Town Manhattan.
Like he's
Yeah.
from exactly.
yeah, right. Florence would have been just a place that people went to visit. If somebody studied there, you'd be impressed with him, right? It was really like a crossroads and a center of culture, really, right? You know, we talk about places like that here, maybe Chicago, or, you know, someplace where there's just a big cultural center. That would be Florence. Austin in Texas is another place like that. That's a big culture center where a lot of stuff converges. Not quite in the same kind of artistic way maybe as Florence, but Florence, so it's Shakespeare's code. All right, so go ahead.
Brought up in Florence, it shall become to servants all hopes conceived, to deck his fortune with his virtuous deeds, and therefore, Tranio, for the time I study virtue and that part of philosophy, will I apply these treats of happiness. By virtue specially shall be, oh my goodness, specially
Okay.
to be achieved. Tell me thy mind, for I have Pisa left, and am to Padua come, and he that leaves a shallow plash to plunge him in the deep, and with Sadie seeks to quench his thirst.
So satiate, like to satiate your thirst,
Oh,
your hunger.
I get it. Yeah.
Yep. So the way he talks to Tranio and the way Tranio responds now in verse is a good indication of their relationship. Even though he's a servant, he's also his kind of well-educated servant and confidant. It shows you that even though Tranio's the servant, they're more like probably brothers or cousins than a master-servant relationship. And he's actually asking Tranio to speak his mind. He's like, this is great. What do you think? I want your opinion. And look what Tranio has to say.
Be perdonato, gentle mastermind. I am at all affected as yourself, glad that you thus continue your resolve to suck the sweets of sweet philosophy. Only, good master, while we do admire this virtue and this moral discipline, let's be no Stoics, nor no stocks, I pray, or so devote to Aristotle's checks as Ovid be an outcast quite abjured.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what he's saying. He's like, I agree with you, but do you get what his caution is here?
It's a little good, too good to be true.
What are people that are stoic like? Do you know?
They're like very like straight faced.
Yeah.
Like they don't really react a lot.
So stoics and stocks. Now, we don't know that word as well, but if you look when he talks about it, stocks are unfeeling people.
Mm.
So stoics and stocks. He says, let's not be like that or so devote to Aristotle's checks. Okay, so Aristotle, he's the guy who writes the rules. So does that sound like a fun dude?
No.
No. So he's like, let's not be so strict that we follow Aristotle as Ovid be an outcast. So what do you know about Ovid? Anything?
No.
It says a Roman love poet.
So Ovid is the love poet. So he's like,
So
let's
he's
not
like
be
going between like rules and emotions.
Yeah. And he's saying, let's not be so ruled by Aristotle that we ignore Ovid. And he's going to further explain what he means by that.
Talk logic with acquaintance that you have, and practice rhetoric in your common talk. Music and poesy used to quicken you. The mathematics and the metaphysics, fall to them as you find your stomach serves you. No profit grows where it is no pleasure taken. In brief, sir, study what you most affect.
So do you get his idea here about what to do with the things he's learned?
Don't let it go to your head. Remember to be human and emotional.
Yeah. Bulk logic. So if you want to use logic, do it with acquaintances that you have. If you like music and poetry, use it to enliven you. So what should you do instead of just read it?
Go live it.
Perform it.
Go out, dance, play music, have fun. I like that if he goes, math and metaphysics, Fall to them as you find your stomach serves. He's like, do whatever you want with those things. He's like, if you have an appetite for them, great. It's like, he doesn't like math either. So that's his advice. His advice is, that's great. You've learned a lot of stuff. Can't you have some fun too?
Mm-hmm. Gramercy's Trainio. Well, thou advise.
Gramercy, there's actually a record company called Gramercy Records.
Yeah.
Gramercy means thanks, and it comes from grant mercy, or God grant mercy, which means thank you. Like, God grant you mercy because you've given me such good advice.
If Vondello thou wert come ashore, we could at once put us in readiness, and take a lodging fit to entertain such friends as time and Padua shall beget.
Now, we haven't met Biondello yet, but he's their other servant that's going to show up. And Biondello's a little more of like a, okay, do this, do that kind of servant than Tranio is. Tranio obviously is pretty much on equal footing with his master here.
Mm-hmm.
Enter Baptista with his 2 daughters. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, I was going to start.
Oh, okay,
but you
sorry.
can do that.
Catherine and Bianca, Gremio, a Pantaloon, and Hortensio, suitors to Bianca. Okay. Pantaloon and some of the phrases here.
Yeah.
What's that?
Okay.
What?
I was like, isn't that like a pant or something? Like, why are people like bringing in a pair of pants?
No, but yes, actually, pantaloons are a kind of pants. They're a kind of loose-fitting pants. And what it refers to here is it's a comedic character. So,
okay.
How many of you have
like
seen?
saying like a clown.
Yeah. Yes. How many of you have seen Birds of Prey or Suicide Squad?
Yes.
Yeah.
So Joker's girlfriend, Harley
Would she
Quinn.
be like
Mm-hmm.
Not a
a
pantaloon.
pantaloon?
No, her name tells you what she
No.
is.
Queen.
Harlequin?
She's a harlequin or harlequino.
Yeah.
So what you'll find
Oh.
is she's a particular type of comedic character. Now, obviously, her name, she's a little more sexed up than all of that. But what we're dealing with here is this play, being Italian, is actually based on older Italian drama and a particular type of Italian drama called commedia dell'arte, or just commedia often when we refer to it in English. So what commedia is, and commedia dell'arte, is it's very particular, and there are very particular character archetypes that show up in it. So you have the pantaloons, or the pantalone is the sort of old goofy father character. You've got the harlequino that is sort of one type of servant. You actually have one called Azani that's another type of servant. And so at some point I'll give you a list of sort of the characters in Commedia and how they fit in here so you can see. But I want you to get to know some of them first before we identify them. So I don't want to start you with like, okay, here's a lesson on Commedia dell'arte. Let's go look at what some of it is first. So Sarah, have you heard of any of this?
Yeah, especially like Arlecchino and like all of these, they appear often in like Carnevale, and like there's a lot of tradition, especially more in the south part of Italy.
Yes, and so what happens is they're what we would call stock characters, and so everybody would recognize them as soon as they saw them here. So Shakespeare is making use of them in this play. If you go back to older versions of the story, they would have those traditional roles. He may deepen them a little here, but for the most part, that's what they are. So in they come.
But stay a while. What company is this?
Master, show some show to welcome us to town.
Gentlemen, importune me no farther, for how I firmly am resolved, you know. That is, not to bestow my youngest daughter before I have a husband for the elder. If either of you both love Catherine, because I know you well and love you well, leave shall you have to court her at your pleasure. Okay,
so now we get into the main, or one of the main plots here, right? Did you pick up on what he just said?
Something about.
Is he looking for a wife
wedding.
for his daughter, or a husband for his daughter?
Yes. How many daughters does he have?
2.
2. So, not to bestow my youngest daughter before I have a husband for the elder.
Oh, I get it.
And then he says, if either of you both love Katerina, then you can court her. So he's not letting anybody court his younger daughter, whose name is Bianca. Okay.
Does this fall under the theme of natural order?
Yeah, why?
Because it's always the eldest that has to marry first, and the
Very good.
youngest has to take care of the family until she can marry.
So the natural order of things here is the eldest daughter should be married first. So because she's not married, Katerina, is upsetting natural order. And let's see why nobody wants to marry her.
To court her, rather. She's too rough for me. There, Hortensio. Will you any wife?
So to cart her. Notice that reference. If you look on the side, women would be paraded through the streets in open carts if they were kind of transgressing community standards. So like whores and people like that. But also cart sort of like an animal, like a horse, right? So he's like, no, man, she's too rough for me. And Katerina responds before Hortensio can. To her father, to Baptista, it says, I pray you, sir, is it your will to make a stale of me amongst these mates?
Mates, maid? How mean you that? No mates for you, unless you are of gentler, milder mode.
So he's like, none of us are going to mate with you.
Oh,
In faith,
shoot.
sir, you shall never need to fear, it is not halfway to her heart. But if it were, doubt not her care should be to comb your noddle with a three-legged stool and paint your face and use you like a fool.
From all such devils, good Lord, deliver us.
And me too, good Lord.
Okay. So it may be hard to pick up on what just happened here, but Catherine just threatened them, or at least first threatened Hortensio. And in almost every version of this play that I've seen at this point, she basically grabs him and physically gets violent with him. So this is a fun scene to watch in the video. If you really want to get a sense of how physical this play is going to be, the video that I posted is a good thing for you to look at. Okay. We're going to stop there for today. So what do you think? Is this working for everybody reading like this?
Yeah.
I kind of dig it. It's a pretty good approximation. It's actually nice because we really focus in too, which I like. Like I said, there's some weird stuff I actually like about this method of learning. I don't know that I want to stay with it, but I do like it for now. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, you have made it through 1 week of utter and complete change. So congratulations.
Yeah.
It's been bumpy, but we made it.
We made it. And you know what?
We're
The beauty
doing it.
is this was with no real planning other than a couple of days of prepping this and forethought and not knowing what it was going to look like for sure until Wednesday. So from here on out, we're set. We'll adapt. We know we can do it. We got this. So we know at worst this will work. And if video dies out, we can't do video, or all our internets get too taxed, then we'll start a chat room and we'll all read and we'll comment on it together and we'll do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So we will adapt to the world. It will not stop us from day 2, darn it, learning some stuff. All right.
Just to make sure, on Monday we don't have class, right?
Let's see, Monday is going to be our day 3, right? Yep.
Yes.
So ironically, on day 3, we will not have Bell 3.
Okay.
Right? So
Cool.
I'll post the
Thank you.
assignment for you, how far you should read then by the next class, which I think for us ends up then being probably not till Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it goes last first. So you'll actually have kind of a long weekend. But I'm going to have us read at least part way, if not all the way through. I mean, we're partway through Act 1, Scene 1 already. I'll take a look and see how far I think we can get in that point.
Okay.
But
Are we going to be tested? Do you know? I don't know if you've like planned that far ahead. But
oh, I
going to
don't
be like
know.
a paper, or
Yes,
we're just
I'm
going to
gonna
play things as we go.
Yes. Is the answer. Yes. No. There'll be a paper of some sort, I'm sure. I'll come up. Look, the bottom line is I'll come up with some grades if I got to come up with some grades. If they're really jonesing for that, we'll figure stuff out. But really, it's just all about learning it to me. Oh, did I lose everybody?